What's that coming out of the exhaust? This smoke just isn't clearing up.
That's down. We won't have to do a head gasket test after this.
So we took this ZR1 Corvette from flooded to functioning, and up to now it hasn't even cost us a lot, but this is where that might change. Now, last time we worked on this relic, we changed all the fluids a million times, swapped starters, and freshened up the ignition system, which resuscitated this very unique dual overhead cam V8 Vette. So the good news is that it ran. It wasn't running all that great. Anything over about 2,000 RPMs, things started to stumble. So we went and made sure everything was fitted up nice in the fuel sending area, and we went and replaced the gasket back there. Now, we focused all our attention on the plenum. There are a lot of support articles online specifically about the ZR1 Plenum. One of the big reasons I think they discontinue production of this car is that, I mean, this is just a very tight fit in a small-ish engine bay. And if you don't have your vacuum routing right, and there's little hoses that run all underneath here, all on the sides, well, it just won't run right. So we referenced some diagrams online. We've got it right. Ben went and had this all fastened down. Look, he's taking the fasteners out again. And that's because there's one last little piece of hose that goes from here to here. And well, if you don't have the plenum tilted up while you're installing it, forget it. You're not going to get it on. So we're going to get that last piece of hose on. We'll fire this up again with a brand new air filter and see if it runs right this time. All right, you hear that hiss? We made a mistake. That's completely open. And this line here that runs back here, this is the one that wasn't hooked up just now. That has to go in there. So all we have to do is loosen these two, hook it back up one more time, we should be good to go. So the ZR1 seeming to run good like right off the bat, and then it starts to run funny again. And Ben noticed that it's popping off the little vacuum line in the rear here that goes to the map sensor. And this is something that he read about online as being a common problem. So a lot of people solve it by just putting a little bit of super glue where the plastic hose goes in to the actual soft hose here. And so we're gonna sit that in place. We'll let it cure for a few minutes. We'll rehook it all up, run it again until it runs right so we can drive it down the road. All right, hold on. I'm gonna slam it.
Yeah.
All right, let's officially take it for a drive. All right, let's do this. We just want to make sure the car basically doesn't blow up on us. If it does, we got the windows open. Should have taken the T-top off. It's too late for that. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, yeah, it works. Look, all it needs is a nice exhaust and that darn power key. All right, so that drive that we just did, we probably only were making about 200 horsepower. Remember, we need this power key to unlock all of the 385 horsepower our ZR1 is capable of, and this car, again, came with no keys. Now, the problem is not sourcing this power key. You can buy a bunch of them on eBay right now between 75 and 100 bucks, but all these keys are blanks that somebody cut to fit the power key switch, and they're all the same cut between 1991 and 1996. And so to spend $100 on a key that somebody bought as a blank for $1 or $2 and then got it cut, I felt was a bit excessive. I tried to go on the ZR1 forum to see if I could find the key cut pattern myself or to see if there was an alternate solution. Posted up just a few days prior to me looking was a ZR1 power bypass switch specifically for a 1991 model year. I reached out to the seller, John, and turns out he wasn't really a seller. He just said it's for free. You can have it as long as you got a good use for it. And he sent this switch to me totally free. I got to give him a huge thanks. And all it takes to install it is just taking off a few of the trim pieces here in the center console, basically where the power key is located. And we're going to have this thing bypassed and the full 385 horsepower unlocked. Ben's already almost finished buttoning this all back up. What do we do here to get this power switch bypass installed?
Well, it was 2 bolts here, one in the center console and the cup holder, a couple clips, dash popped out. You disconnected one plug that went into this key slot. You put in the bypass, just ran it over to this cup holder, and we're ready to go.
Now with the ZR1 running halfway decent and the power key bypass, I figured maybe just a few more trips to the parts store and we will have this car completely finished, but I couldn't be more wrong. You see, most of the hard parts for the ZR1, take for example like our starter that we already replaced, just don't exist at the parts store. It's stuff that you have to order online, and a lot of it they don't even make anymore. Like that starter was a remanufactured unit, and that means that these online sellers want your old parts in return. They charge a core charge, which means you got to ship the stuff back. Like our old starter, the core charge on this was $25, and if I send it back using my local ship store, the postage itself costs $24.05, so it's not even really worth returning. But when I hop on stamps.com, quoting the same exact service, it's just $13.59. That's almost half the price over at the ship store, and that's because stamps.com has the best shipping rates possible with up to 84% off retail prices, and their intuitive site lets you compare rates on the fly, so you're always assured the best deal possible. When you're running a small business, I find it imperative to save money where you can without taking any sort of compromise, and you can do just that on your UPS and USPS shipments over at stamps.com/Samcrac. Stop waiting in line at the post office and paying more for the same exact services you're going to get a steep discount on over at stamps.com/Samcrac. When you go there or hit the link in the description box, you're going to get a free 4-week trial along with some free postage to get you started and a free digital scale. With no long-term contracts or commitments, all you got to do is head on over to stamps.com/Samcrac. So right now, car's running in the normal mode. If we flip the switch here, check it out. The light comes on right there. We're good. Car runs and it drives pretty darn good. It idles really nice, but when you put your foot down, you can feel it doesn't have the full 400 horsepower. Even though we have that power key turned on, there's a problem. We still have the service engine soon light on the dashboard. Now, like we discussed before, this car has OBD1, the original onboard diagnostic system, and all my new scanners are not compatible with it. So I looked it up, and they sell an OBD1 reader at the auto parts store. It's like 40 or 50 bucks, but it's kind of a joke in what it does, and you can replicate this $40 or $50 scanner with a paper clip or a piece of wire. Here, let me show you how. All right, we're gonna start by just turning the key on, leaving the engine off. Here is our OBD port, and we're gonna jump A and B. Now, look up here. The service engine soon light starts to blink, and it will go 1, 1, 2. That's telling us it's getting ready to read our code. It'll do that just a few times. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1. That's code 31. Watch again. 1, 2, 3, 1. A quick search tells us that code 31 is a problem with our cam position sensor. Reading about it, not only can this be caused by a faulty sensor, it can also come about if you're having a low voltage condition, specifically with the weak or dead alternator. Code 31 will be generated and put the car into a limp mode, and that's likely why our Corvette feels so sluggish. Now, if you've noticed, we've been jumping this car off and on while we're working on it. And even though the battery is new, it's died a few times on us because we've kept accessory lights on and we're constantly testing it, turning it on and off. Now, to make sure this wasn't an electrical issue, I charged up the battery and afterward used this alternator tester. And as you can see, our alternator tested just fine. Now, unfortunately for us, the cam sensor is just another one of those difficult to get parts. It's totally different than the generic C4 cars, and it's no longer made by GM. Now, there's some custom solutions we can implement in the case that we have a bad sensor, but before we have to stop work again to order more parts, we figured we should just take a quick look at it and make sure there wasn't something obviously wrong. And it's a good thing we did. That might be our problem.
I would say that's definitely a issue.
Hold on.
Oh, God.
No way. So you're telling me...
I'm telling you, I reached down there to unplug it, and it was not plugged into anything. It just pulled right
Was it
out.
loose?
I don't know.
Or was it not plugged in?
I don't know whether it was loose or not plugged in. All I did was simply lightly pull on it, and the entire connector came up.
So here's the connector.
Yes, I'm looking for the other side right now.
So Ben just got this plate off right here. That plate is what holds the sensor in the engine. And while he was pulling on the wire to get it out of the engine there, the opposite end came loose. This wasn't even plugged in, or at the very least wasn't snug. I would bet that that would throw a code 31. This is really strange. So we found where the cam sensor plugs into. It's that guy right there, which goes directly into the ECM. We have a new O-ring on it. I'm just gonna put it all back together, plug it in, and see if that light goes out. Will that have remedied our code? Key in the ignition. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. It's out. Gone? It's gone. Unreal. Now we just have an ABS light and an airbag light. Good. Yeah, and we don't need airbags or brakes anyway. The power was back and everything felt amazing, at least for a couple of minutes. Literally half a mile down the road, we noticed we had some smoke, and not just a little bit of smoke. Now, Ben was convinced it was just some residual oil that hit the headers while we were messing with the cam sensor, but I'm pretty sure it was something else. So remember when we got the car first all hooked up and it puked out a bunch of like oily mess because water made its way into the exhaust? We've got the exhaust hooked up partially for the first time. So you can see behind me it's smoking right now. I was a little bit alarmed. The car's idling perfect. So that's what we got going on. We just have residual crap left in the exhaust. It smells awful. But hopefully that won't cause too much of an issue on this quick test drive. Jesus. Is that right? Yeah, look at the smoke behind us. Look at the smoke when we get to the upper RPMs. I'm wondering, do you think the injectors are shot? This smoke just isn't clearing up. Either way, we were both so captivated by the smoke show, we missed the coolant temp gauge getting into the danger zone.
That's down. We won't have to do a head gasket test after this.
That got real hot real quick. I've let it sit here for about 40 minutes or so. I brought the block tester. Just going to do a quick head test, make sure we did not cause any big damage before we continue to figure out what's going on, why this car is smoking so much. All right, you guys know all too well how this works. We got purple test fluid. Ben is going to hover it over the tank there. He is going to aerate it once I start the car, and we want it to remain purple. Here we go. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Car is in neutral. Well, I don't like that. See how it was aerating itself right off the bat? Nah, there's air in the system. So far, that's really good. Every car that I've had with a blown head gasket, it happens almost instantly. At this point, we should be all right. It's running warm, so we're good. We're not rebuilding this motor, at least not yet.
We were never rebuilding this motor. So.
Hey, you were the one who was crying wolf. You're going, you better get out your block tester. Not having a blown head gasket is a really good feeling. And even though this has been a slow process, we've seen a lot of progress. You have to consider this car was saltwater flooded. Now, to make sure we didn't overheat again, I tested the thermostat and it opened up just fine. We likely introduced an air pocket created from the removal of some of the coolant lines running into the plenum. What wasn't good was the brittle old gasket around the thermostat. So I ordered a new one and reinstalled everything and went back together just fine. After vacuum filling the cooling system, I took it back on a drive and it wasn't overheating. And it still drove decent, but I noticed after a few first gear pulls, it started feeling sluggish again and the engine light popped back up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. So we have code 43. Code 43 is for the NOx sensors, and there is a slew of different problems your car could have that would set that code off. Again, if this were a modern car with modern diagnostics on board, well, you could literally plug a computer into it and within a few minutes figure out exactly what is causing your knock, or if you just have a faulty sensor. but since this is an old school car, we got to do things the analog way. Luckily, there are a few other symptoms that came along very shortly after we got that code that made it pretty obvious as to what was going on. Now, when I got back in the car, just literally a few moments after pulling that code 43 and tried to start it up, besides it being obvious that the car didn't start, it was very obvious to me that there was no fuel odor whatsoever. Usually, if you have a crank no start, your fuel system is working just fine. You'll just smell raw gas as the car is trying to start, which immediately made me think maybe we've got a fuel pressure issue. I hooked up the fuel pressure gauge. All right, here we go. This is just the first turn of the key in 3, 2, 1. Now we're gonna crank it. 3, 2, 1. We can look really quick and just make sure we didn't have a fuel pump fuse go bad. But remember, we pulled this out when we were test firing the car. It's FP1. You can see it's just fine. It would be a very weird instance for a car to be running good one moment, then be a crank no start the next moment with 0 PSI of fuel coming from the rails. Well, I called up my good friend Alex Palmieri from Legit Street Cars, and he nailed it right on the head the first start. He goes, "So are you sure there's fuel in the tank?" But when I stuck a scope camera down in the filler just to check things out, it's pretty apparent. It is bone dry in there. So we've simply run out of fuel. Just a few days ago, I was convinced that this would be it. It would be the final video on the ZR1. Things were really looking like they were going to be finished, but clearly not everything's been resolved. We still have that smoke billowing out the tailpipes, especially when we get the engine really warm. We get into that upper RPM range. The thing idles so good, it kind of negates the idea that maybe we've got a fuel injector issue. But then again, maybe not, because this car has 16 fuel injectors. I guess half which come alive. I'm not sure if it's with the power key turned on, or maybe it's just in the upper RPM range. It is very clear that this was a very over-engineered and special car when it came out. And it's actually very special to me. That's why we have spent a lot of time refurbishing a lot of little components, because I want this to be darn near perfect when it's all put back together. And so we will have one final video on this car, but not until I have it running perfect, and I'm going to be working overtime this coming week to make sure we get it there. If you guys are as excited as I am to have a piece of American muscle history for a fraction of what these things sell for now, be sure to hit that like button. Also, I've been looking at my stats lately, and it seems like only like 1 out of 5 of you watching right now are actually subscribed to the channel. So make sure you hit that button and maybe hit the bell next to it if you want to be notified when we come out with that final ZR1 video. Guys, I can't thank each and every one of you enough for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.